Hello, hello, hello. Marietta back with another video. I want to talk to y'all about something. I have been talking to people about this tiny house craze that's going on around the world. You talking about 280 square feet, maybe 500 square feet, 700 square feet, some of them as small as 300 square feet. I mean, you're looking at the fact of the American dream where American always wanted these great big lavish houses. Now they're going into houses that are small as, some of them smaller than a shed. I mean, they're decorating them. You can get these houses. I mean, I've heard them be as cheap as $7,000 and up. And people are actually excited about buying these tiny homes now because they are affordable. And you don't have a lot of space. You don't have to take a lot to heat it. You won't have a lot of electric bill. You won't have a lot of place to clean up. Hell, you could actually sit on the toilet and fry an egg at the same time. This is how tiny they are, but yet and still, what we're going through right now, people are desperate. They're about to take anything and everything that they can get. Anything you can put a roof over your head. The tiny houses are being popped up everywhere. People are actually cashing in on these situations. I mean, I even seen people have taken these tiny houses and set them in their backyard, and they turn them right on into Airbnb, start renting them out. I mean, you can have them delivered right on site. I mean, but when you think about these houses being delivered on a trailer or built right on the trailer where you can move it and take it up and down the road, take it wherever you want to take it. If you decide to move it, you can move it. I mean, tiny houses have really gone crazy in the prices. I've seen them. I mean, the prices of which they're going up now. Some of them are even at $100,000 and up for these little tiny houses that look like doll baby houses that you can build yourself. Some of them so small that I think Ken and Barbie had a bigger house. And this is what we're now looking at. That's going to be popping up all over the U.S. in order for the American people to live in. But where are the bigger houses going? All these big two-story houses, all these great big houses with these big lavish rooms, all this luxury, the granite countertops and all that is being put into the tiny house. So the tiny house right now is affordable for one. It's easier to move for two. It's less expensive. But yet it can hold all the glamour, the glitz, that the bells and whistles that your big house had, just on a smaller scale. And I really believe that the tiny house craze now is booming because of the fact of what's going on in the economy right now, with the high cost of rent, and people can't get losing jobs, and the tariffs, and everything that's going on in the world today is really pushing this tiny house craze. So people are actually looking into getting these tiny houses, and they're actually making them home. Sometimes you see two or three people going into these homes. Sometimes it be a husband and wife, two or three kids going into this little tiny space, sizing down all their belongings. Because as American people, we would always buy big. We bought big. We always had to have a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. Some stuff we used, some stuff we didn't even need. And even when you watch the tiny house show when it first came out, the gentleman that was hosting the show would go to these people's house and tell them they would have to size down everything they got into their big house in order to make the things fit in this tiny house. He would tell them how much square footage they had and how many things they can bring. And they even got so clever with it that they even put decks on the outside. They try to utilize every little bit of space they possibly could inside the house by making a loft upstairs so you could crawl up there. Maybe one or two people could lay up there. And then underneath the stairway that they would build like a little pocket under the stairway. And you could use that for storage. You may have a tiny zinc, maybe a tiny little toilet, a shower for two people that can fit two people. But the house was functional. It was functional, and they would get in there and they would live in these tiny houses. But then they would have extra money to go on vacation. They wouldn't have to stay home. They could actually enjoy life. They could go places, do a lot of things that people were not actually being able to do in these large, big houses. But they found that this little house, they could actually have more money in their pocket. They had more freedom. They got outdoors more. Why? Because you didn't want to be caged up inside the house. Really, truly, the tiny house was just created to sleep in. And once you go to sleep, once you wake up in the morning, it was like you want to get outdoors. You want to go do some things. You want to go hiking, go biking, get out and go for a walk, or just get in your car and go take a ride. You didn't want to stay indoors all the time because you were not, as they say, stuck in the paying bills 24/7 in this tiny house like you would be in this big house. In this big house, you got more lights burning. In the big house, you got more bills. You got more space to heat. You got more air conditioning you have to burn. So more electric, more heat, more everything. And it's like saying in that little tiny house, it was just used for what it was used for, to sleep, to eat, and it actually, for some people, they said it brought their families closer together because they weren't way on the other side of the house in another room where you couldn't have to text nobody in another room. Everybody was right there. They could eat together. They could talk together. And they spent more time together because you actually took it back to interacting with your family, opposed to everybody just being on their phones and nobody talking to nobody and nobody knowing what nobody's into, what nobody's doing. And then when they did go outside, when I used to watch Tiny House on TV. I used to really love watching Tiny House because I loved how the families would look for these places together and how their kids would get excited when they climbed up in the loft. And they really enjoyed the fact that the family was all there together. So now we see tiny houses popping up all over the place, to the point where now they're even making like little tiny villages here and there. Before, these places would never ever let you put these places anywhere near neighborhoods that are booming, or neighborhoods that were, thriving, because they looked at these tiny houses like these were for poor folks. These were houses that you either had to be broke, you ain't had no money, you was down on your luck, you couldn't afford the big lavish house. Now, you could be middle class, you could be rich, you could be everything and still live in the same tiny house. From my understanding, Elon Musk has a whole row of tiny houses that he get ready to roll out Tesla tiny houses. So now you got elegant tiny houses, lavish tiny houses. Tiny houses has gone crazy, and the craze for them has gone crazy to the point where now you can have that tiny house built any kind of way you want it inside. Why? Because it don't take much material. How much material does it take to build 4 walls in a box? It's like 280 square feet or 400 square feet or 700 square feet or 600 square feet. It doesn't take much wood. Lumber is expensive. But to build something like that, and then you don't need much counter space. You don't need much. You can use any kind of material you want inside of here because you don't need a whole lot of it. Say like when this double wide I live in is 2,500 square feet. I can't remember how much flooring I had to buy, but it was a lot. And it was expensive to run flooring from one end of this place to the other. Tiny house, you think of each one of these rooms are bigger than that whole house of a tiny house. And how you could take this flooring and put in that many tiny houses, and how many tiny houses you can have to rent out or to buy at, say you pay $7,000, $8,000 or $50,000 for each one, or $7,000 for each one, or whatever you pay for a tiny house. Or even if you get a shed and you redo it, like my white shed I got in my backyard. I just sit here and I just think about how the tiny house, when it first came out, people thought that was crazy. People thought that was doll houses. It was disrespectful. It's low rating. It was degrading. I heard people say, I would never live in that. Be careful what you say. You don't never say never. You'll never say never, because them same tiny houses are eye-catching. Them same tiny houses got people looking at them all over the world now. Them same tiny houses are housing a lot of people, a lot of families. They're buying land and putting these tiny houses on them and living and going on about their business and proud to walk in and out of it. Don't care who sees them walking out of it. Got their new cars parked out front of them. They have that little teeny tiny house. I saw one on the back road out here in South Carolina where I am. I see several of them. In these woods, I see several of them. They got brand new BMWs parked inside of a little teeny itty bitty, in front of a little teeny itty bitty house. How can they afford that BMW? Because they paying for that itty bitty little teeny house on their own land. And they had a pickup truck. So their money is going into their vehicles so they could travel to go and do what they want to do. But they're not paying a lot of money for that house. Remember that commercial that said, I'm not going to pay a lot for that muffler? Now they're saying, I'm not going to pay a lot for that chimney. But they'll still pay a lot for that muffler. Because they're paying a lot for them vehicles so they can look good, so they can ride good, but they just ain't going to pay a lot for that house. And now nobody wants to pay a lot for that house. So them tiny houses are really taking over. Them tiny houses are really eye-catching. Them tiny houses is where the buck is, and you're getting more for your buck in that little teeny tiny house. Because now they're realizing that them big houses kept them broke. Them big houses kept them stressed out. Them big houses kept them home, kept them isolated, kept them in a confinement because they really couldn't travel a whole lot, couldn't go a lot of places. It cost them too much because all the money was being poured into the house. Now they're actually trying to sell these houses so they can get out from under these great big mortgages. And tiny house has taken the stage. Tiny house has taken off. Tiny house is where people are looking now to have that granite countertops, them hardwood floors, them stainless steel appliances, the marble bathrooms with all that, with all that tile bathrooms, all them at high tallest with the push flush on the top. Oh, they really are taking all that glamour right inside that tiny house. And people are buying them. And they're buying them in record numbers. And they're going on and live their life inside that tiny house. The very house that people were saying, I wouldn't live in that. Ain't no way in the world I'm going to sit on the toilet and fry egg at the same time. Ain't no way in the world that I can be in my bed and my feet could be in the refrigerator, on the refrigerator, because that's how close. They say that because that was their way of joking about how close knit everything was in the place. You know, you could stand on one side and stand in the middle of the floor and touch both sides of the wall. That's how tight the room was. But yet and still, people are buying these houses. They're putting them on them little teeny trailers, and they're going on and live. So I just wanted to let y'all know that, you know, the tiny house craze is going crazy. People are out here and they're shopping these tiny houses. I see them popping up in the woods out here where I'm at. They're buying these tiny houses. They're buying the land and they're popping these tiny houses up. And they actually really do look cute now that you look at them. They do look like doll baby houses though, because we're not used to that. We're not used to seeing that. I'm not used to seeing that. I'm not used to grown people trying to live in these little tiny houses. But I understand it because I'd rather live in that little tiny house than be sleeping on the ground or live out on the road or live in the yard or live in, you know, even car life. I'd still rather have that piece of property with that little house on it. So y'all type in the comments and tell me, what do y'all think about the tiny house craze? And would you be willing to live in a tiny house? And if you had to sell your house, would you be in the market for buying a tiny house? And I've even seen people buy these tiny houses and prop them up in their yard and open them up and start renting them out right away. That's an extra way to create some income. If you can pop that tiny house up in your yard and go on and let people live in it, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you got to realize, you know, people are doing what they got to do to even stretch their income right now. And tiny house is another way to stretch that income. So y'all type in the comments and tell me what you think about the tiny house craze. And would you be willing to live in a tiny house? Or do you know anybody that has a tiny house? And if and so you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're trying to get to 20K and we're really working hard over here. And if and so you have not turned your notification bell on, please turn your notification bell on so you'll be notified when I drop my next video. Y'all be blessed.